Good morning, everyone. Welcome into Salesforce Developer Group and Salesforce Apex Hour. And today we are going to cover the Einstein Analytic. And today we have a special guest from the London, Rick, and she is going to give the demo and she is going to explain what is the use of the Einstein Analytics. So my name is Amit Chaudhary and I am the Salesforce MVP and the organizer of the Farmington Hills Salesforce Developer Group and the founder of Salesforce Apex Hour. So I will not take too much time here. So let's hand over to Rick so she can introduce herself and start with the session.
Thank you so much, Amit. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually switch your slide, but basically that's your slide. Moving on. So my name is Ricky Hofgaard. As Amit said, I'm actually based in London. I'm originally from Denmark, but right now I'm in London and I work with Salesforce as a Einstein Analytics Solution Architect. I am part of what we call the ACE team, so Analytics Center of Excellence. And basically, our focus is customer success and evangelism as well. So we're part of the product side of things. So we're not CSG or customer success or sales, but we're directly linked to the product side. I'm also a user group leader. So I actually, what some people may know about me, I co-organized the Part user group in London, and I also recently started up the Einstein Analytics user group in London. I also run a blog, salesforceblogger.com, where I post a lot of how-to guides on Einstein Analytics. So if you, after this session, are intrigued, then please go ahead and go in and look. There's a lot of how do I create a dynamic age, or compare tables, so a lot of different things. I also have my Twitter handle here, so if anyone are interested in following me, then you can do that as well. So the agenda today, I was thinking a lot how to actually put it into a content that was relevant. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have had experience with Einstein Analytics, so I kind of thought, let me go all the way from the scratch and then start building more complexity. And we'll have another session next week where I will be a little bit more advanced. So today's more the UI features we'll be looking at. So, but basically some key concept, then give you the introduction to the UI and building your first data set. We'll look at compare tables, which is basically one of my absolute favorite features in Einstein Analytics, very powerful. We'll look at custom maps because that's something that is different and also very, I think, very relevant to making really good dashboards. Actions and embedding your dashboards, because in order to make sure that we actually are able to increase our user adoption, those are some of the things that I would highly recommend that you enable. As I am Salesforce, I'm sure you've seen this one. Do have to say that there is a forward-looking statement. So if you are looking to purchase anything, please make your decisions on what's currently available in the platform. With that said, let's just move on to the actual presentation. So first of all, there's a few concepts in Einstein Analytics, and I'll start out, by the way, just with a few slides first, and then I'll move into Einstein Analytics. And I'll start showing some things, but just a few concepts, so bear with me a few slides and we'll get onto it. So first of all, when we're working with Einstein Analytics, there's a few concepts that are really relevant to know. So I had a presentation at Dreamforce around how do you compare it to standard reports, and I thought there's a few slides here that was quite relevant, because if your background is in Salesforce, I'm sure you worked with standard reports within Salesforce. So the first thing that is worth knowing is the data set. So the data set is basically our data. It's kind of similar to report type in the sense that this is the way that we're structuring our data. So it contains information about our opportunity, our account, and maybe our user object. Now, we are bringing data from a standard Salesforce or from Salesforce into Einstein Analytics. And in order for us to do that, we're using the data flow that you see there. once we have this data set, we can start exploring it in a single exploration, and that's called a lens. So that would be similar to your report. So you have one grouping, you maybe have one measure, you have a chart type as well. That will be your lens. Then we have our dashboards, and there's not really anything different in the big picture here. We do have a few extra things that we can do in the Einstein Analytics dashboard, but basically the dashboard is a collection of different explorations. And all of this we save within a app in Einstein Analytics. It's similar, or it's actually really the same as a folder in Salesforce, because this is actually what is controlling your permissions and access rights to whatever is within this app or folder. So who can see it and stuff. So a few more concepts. Now we just talked about the different elements. What are they? Now, when we're looking at Einstein Analytics, I did say before that we're actually taking our data from elsewhere. So we can take our data from Salesforce, which is a natural choice. We can also import CSV. We can take data from different databases. We can even leverage some default connectors to bring this data into Einstein Analytics. Once we have it in Einstein Analytics, we can start some transformation. So we can calculate new fields, or we can join this data together. So it's within one flat file. Okay. So the reason we're doing this, we're bringing it into one flat file, is basically so we can search a lot faster on this. So we're using our data flow to bring it in. We can also, our data flow is also where we can take our transformations a little bit further. We then get the data set. We can then have our lens, and we can then take all this data and we can put it into a dashboard. Now let's just have a look at the UI for a little bit. So let me just switch over. So basically now I am within Einstein Analytics. For those of you that have not done this before, hold on, this one is just slightly annoying. I'm sorry, I'm having like the menu here. Okay, there we go. So the way we're going into Einstein Analytics is just this app selector here. And in this app selector, we can just select Analytics Studio. It opens up a new window, and here we are. Now, what we'll see here is just an overview. So we'll see an overview of our different apps, our dashboards, and our lenses, and also what are the different data sets that we have. So we can click on anything, we can start going further. I do want to say that up here in the gear icon, you can see that we also have access to the data manager. We'll look more at that next week, but basically the data manager is anything that has to do with your data flow, your data transformation, you go into that. Now let's just have a look at a simple data flow here, or data set here. So you can see here I have my, my data set that I have clicked on, and now I'm exploring it. I can here start taking a different measure. So by default, it's going to take count of rows, but I can go ahead and change it to sum of quantity if I wanted to, and I can start grouping by maybe city. I can also go ahead and say this should be ascending. And maybe I also want to apply a filter. You can see I can do that down here. Now, this is not maybe the most, there's a lot of data here. Maybe I just want to have a top 3. So I can go in here and say apply a top 3. And then you can see here, we now have narrowed down into the result we want. It's possible for me to change my charts over here. So if I wanted to use anything else, I can go and select it, or I can let Einstein suggest something for me by selecting a suggested chart. Now, this is the default Explorer that we're looking at. This is the chart mode that we're in. We also have our table mode, and we also have our SACL that we'll be looking at next week as well. So these are the kind of different modes that we can go into. If I go in, if I wanted to take this into a dashboard, I could. So I could actually go in and clip this into our dashboard. I'll just need to call it something. So I'm just going to call it test because I'm always bad with giving things name. But so this is our dashboard builder. You can see these are all the different widgets we can use. And here are the steps. Steps are the same as a lens. It's basically a single exploration of your data. We can pull in any of these steps that we have into our dashboard. We may even want to include a text on our dashboard, and then we can start building out whatever we want on our dashboard. This is enough for just the initial introduction. So I will switch back to the slides now, and I will just take a few more concepts. So just a few more concepts, as I said. So when we're building, one thing that is really important to understand when we're working with Einstein Analytics is the data, because the data really is what it comes down to. And we need to understand how we want to structure our data. Now in standard reporting, as you can see on the left, we're used to working with report type, where we start here on the top level of account. This is our root, and we start moving downwards in the hierarchy. We add in our opportunity, then we may add in our opportunity line item, and then it stops here. We can only have 3 levels. Now in Einstein Analytics, it works a little bit differently. We kind of like switch this one upside down, and we start with our opportunity line item, our most detailed level, so the lowest grain, as we also say. And then we start adding more data to it. So we then add our opportunity. We also can add our account, and we can add our own information based on our opportunity. Now, as you can see, I can add more levels, and it doesn't have to be that direct hierarchy. But it is very important to understand that we are starting with the lowest level, and that also has some implications when we're actually starting working with this data set. We need to understand that, hey, if I want to look at my opportunities, I need to make sure, for each opportunity I can have, maybe I have 5 opportunity line item. So this one will actually be duplicate, because what we're doing in this transformation process is putting it into a flat file. And then we're indexing every single column, not the measures, but everything else. We're indexing so we quickly can find what we're looking at. I tend to say, imagine it if you're handed a book and I'm asking you to tell me how many times does it say Salesforce in this book, for instance, then you would have to go through every single line in the book and read every single word. And then you will get back to me maybe a day later saying, these are where we can find it. Now, in Einstein Analytics, since we've indexed it, think about in your book, in the back of it, you have an index. You go to underneath S, you find Salesforce, and you can see, okay, page 5, 10, 13, and so forth. That's where you're finding this word. So this is kind of similar to what we're doing in Einstein Analytics. We're making that a whole lot faster. And that also means that we don't have the same issues when it's coming to timing out of report, as you might have seen and experienced over in our standard reports. Okay, I hope that made sense. This is something that is quite important to understand. So let's try and just build a simple not dashboard, data set right now. So I don't need to save this, so I'm just gonna leave it. And what I instead want to do is I want to go up here to create in my top right corner, click create, and I can click on my data set. Now you can see this is something that is new from winter. We've changed a little bit how this works, but basically I can choose Salesforce data. This is the most normal way of creating your data set. I'll now give it a name, so I can call it Apex Hours. You would probably call it something relevant to what you're doing, but for me to actually know why I created this later, I tend to call it what I am doing. Okay, I'm going to put it into my default Salesforce data flows. Again, this is in the data manager. It's the transformation part. I'm going to click on next, and I'm now taken to the data set builder. So the first thing I have to choose is the root object. So again, remember what I said, we're starting with the lowest grain. So in this case, let me choose opportunity. And what I can now do is click on this plus, and I can start selecting the fields that I want to include. Maybe I also want to have stage, maybe I want to have type, and I can start selecting all the fields that I want. So these are all the ones that we have within Salesforce. Now, notice here that I have this relationship. I can click on that, and here you can see all the different objects that are related. So here I can go in and say, hey, I want to join in my account information, and maybe I also want to go in and join my owner information. And now you can see here that I actually are having this little bit more flexible structure compared to what we had before in standard reports. Again, I can click on my plus. I can go in and say, well, here, account name, maybe I want to have account type, billing country, billing city, and so forth. You can start going down, and like, even if you remember what exactly you want, you can also type it in. Again, notice I have the relationship, so if I wanted to go further out, I could start adding more and more data. We don't have a cap on that. So with the user, I can do the same thing. I can go in here and say, maybe I just want to have the full name, and you can click on full name. And then basically now I can say, this is what I need my data set to include. These are the fields that I want. And I'm going to click next. And it's added into this default data flow that I've been working, or that I added it to. I also have to define where do I actually want this to be going into, like which app, which folder do I want it in. And I'm going to just define my shared app. That's just kind of like the untitled folders in standard reports. So I'm going to click create. It's now being set into queue, and I can actually go here and I can see that it's running. So hopefully in a few minutes, and that shouldn't be that long, but we will then have our data set. And while we wait, I'll just switch back to the slides. And let's talk a little bit about compare tables. So compare tables, as I said, is one of my absolute favorite features. I don't know if any of you have had experience with working with standard reports and the formula fields that we have there. You can kind of compare it, but I will say that compare tables are quite, they're a lot more powerful than you have in your standard reports. So what it is basically a table format where we can do any comparison, or we can start doing any calculation. And I tend to say that whenever you are faced with a requirement where you say, oh, I need to have my conversion rate, well, that's a calculation, right? So as soon as you think of anything that has to do with calculation, you think of compare tables. That would be my recommendation. Typical examples that you can see is percentage change from one month to another. So if you want to see like how are we evolving from one month to another, then you can do that with compare tables. No need for advanced SQL. The same thing if you want to do year-to-date comparison, I would also start out in compare table. If you want to try it out yourself, there's a few links here. And I'll see if I can't share the slides afterwards, but basically these links will give you a few examples that you can go through in terms of creating a compare table. But let's have a look at least one of them right now. So let's go back into Einstein Analytics. And, oh, sorry, we just in winter started with this new in-app kind of guidance for new users. Since I haven't logged into this one or to Data Manager since winter, I'm getting all those notifications. You may notice that I just click on the refresh. Now you can see the status is actually that is successful, the data flow that I just created. So if I jump back into Einstein Analytics and let's go up to my data sets here, I should have I have my Apex hours right here. So let's have a look at actually instead of doing this, let's just create a data dashboard. Sorry, going back to Analytics Studio, I'm clicking create and I click dashboard. Let's see it within a dashboard. I'm going to do a blank dashboard. So we're starting from scratch. The other ones are templated, so you can start with a little bit of help, which can be nice sometimes. So I'm in here. I want to create a step, and remember that's kind of the same as the lens. So we're going to click on step, and we're going to click on apex hours for the data set that we want to use. And this is somewhat similar to what we did before. So I'm just going to call this POP, so period over period, because hopefully I was smart enough before and I actually created a date field in here. But anyway, let's do sum of amount as a measure, and we're gonna do bars. We're gonna do, let's say, close date. Do I have it somewhere here? Oh, it's all the way in the top here, close date, and I want it to be year, month. So now you can see that this is basically the selections that I've done. But what I want to do is I want to go to my table mode. So I'm going to go to compare table. And now I want to do that calculation. So what I will do is click on this plus, because I need to have a placeholder measure that I can use. And you can choose whatever here. It doesn't really matter if you choose count of rows or sum of amount or something else, because this is just going to be a placeholder. So what I want to do now is I want to click here next to my sum of amount, and you can see here that I can actually go in and edit this column. So that's what I want to do. And I'm going to call this POP. I think it was last release, we introduced this column alias. If you work with Einstein Analytics before, this is quite useful in the sense that that will allow you to start using, instead of column A and B, as you see up here, you can call it something else. And if you're referencing that somewhere else, let's see in a binding or a calculation, then you can use whatever you called it instead of having to remember, oh, was that column A or B? Something that's quite nice. So here I have my my calculation option. So here, what I can do is I can either start typing out whatever I want, or I can use one of the predefined. So in this case, I know that I want to see what is the percentage change from one month to another. So I know there is going to be the option of either change from previous, or in this case, the period over period. So let's click on that. And since I only have one grouping, it's not going to be that hard. I also only have one measure. So you can see here that I only have sum of amount to really choose from. I can only really compare month over month. I don't have anything else. And then finally, I can then say, do I want to have this as a percentage change, or do I want it as a unit change? In this case, I'm just going to stick with the percentage. I'm going to hit apply. And then hopefully you'll now see that it says POP and I have my percentage calculation. So I can now go back and I can click close here. This is not very visually appealing, so I can actually go ahead and change this over to a chart mode. I can ask Einstein, what chart do you think is actually the best? So it will come with some suggestions, and down here I know it's going to have the combo chart with things added into the same axis. Now, I just want to let you guys know that if I did switch back to my compare table, I did have the option of maybe hiding my sum of amount. Maybe that is not really relevant, especially if we're doing something like lead conversion. We don't need to have all the fields that we need for the calculation, so we can go ahead and hide the column here as well if we want. In this case, I want to keep both, so I'm just going to go up and undo the one step here, and I'm having my chart. I now can click done, and you can see here I have my step that I can drag over into my dashboard here. I have a lot of different options. I would encourage you guys to play with it due to the time. I'm not gonna, mess with this a lot. But you can go in and say, hey, maybe I don't want the legend to be up here. Maybe I want it to be in the bottom. So I can go and say bottom center. And so you can go ahead and play with all the different visual components within your chart. Something I would definitely encourage you to kind of make sure it's visually appealing. Cool. So let's go back and look at the slides. So that was the compare table. Maybe if I have time in the end of the session, I can show you how we can do year-to-date comparison. I'll try and do it next week when we look at the cycle as well. So the other thing that I really like is the custom maps. Now, custom maps is a way to actually display our data in a different way. So we're probably all familiar with being able to show it by country, and you can see like a world map maybe, or you have a map of America. All these like default maps are built into Einstein Analytics. But sometimes we want to show data in a little bit different way. And we can actually do that in Einstein Analytics. For instance, if we want to look at sales within specific regions, maybe we have a specific way of defining our sales regions. We want to have a custom map to do that. We could also, let's say we were working with racetracks and we want to see how cars are looking at different parts of the track, we could create one for that. If we were managing tickets for a stadium, we could maybe have a stadium as a map. So there's a lot of different options. Again, a few links here to try it out yourself. There's a trailhead module. And if you want to generate some of your own custom maps, there's one of our solution engineers, Mike Lowe, that has created a YouTube video that can actually go through how you can create pretty much anything to a custom map. Now, I have a training session next week, and I will actually go to Copenhagen, of all places. And so I created a custom map for that purpose. So let's hopefully see that that will be working. There is a step before I do that I have to do. So I'm just going to go into Analytics Studio again, and I'm going to click on the create button here, and I'm going to click on my data set. So I need to, just because I don't have this data within a Salesforce, I'm going to upload a CSV file that I have. And is in this CSV file, I have some data that is going to correspond to the map that I'm going to show you in a bit. So I'm just going to click next, next. One thing that is important for me to do here is when I import this, I want to make sure that each column is the right format. I know the postcode, it's not actually going to be a measure, that's going to be a dimension, something I can group by. So I want to just make sure I change that, but everything else I'm pretty sure is okay. So I'm going to upload that file now, and you can see Einstein working, preparing my data set, making sure it's being uploaded. Now, while we, okay, so that was actually really fast. So what we can actually do is, let's switch back into the data, the dashboard here. What we can actually do is we can create a new step, and in this time, I'm gonna choose, okay, I should have called it something else. Doesn't matter, one of them should be fine. So let's call this visitors. So this is actually a museum in Denmark. And I found some data on the visitor. So yeah, bear in mind, this dashboard I'm creating makes no sense, but it's just for illustration. So what I want to do is I want to take, let's say, count or sum of quantity, and the bar, I want that to be the postcode. Now, this is not how I actually want my data to be shown, so I can switch over into my chart. I can actually select my map here. Now, if I go down to my formatting section here, you'll be able to see there's a map part of my formatting. And in here, what I'm actually able to do is I can go ahead and choose any of our default maps. Now, I know there's nothing in Denmark with postcodes. So I created my own custom map, and I can now, by clicking on this plus, and this is the first time I'm doing this, by the way, because this is, well, it's not a new feature, but it's a new UI enable feature in winter. So I haven't actually tried this before. So hopefully it will work. But basically, I have my file, I can import it. So here you can see I have my upload GeoJSON. And I have this one that is my DK post number final. I'm gonna open that, and it's gonna load in. And now I can give it a name. I'm just gonna keep the name. It doesn't really matter what I'm calling it here. But here you can now see this is a map of Denmark. I can give this a name, so maybe I want to call it DK postcodes. I now have to say, what is the projection type? If you see me changing this to maybe Miller, you can see that it's basically how it's projected onto the screen. If I want to, I can start changing these boundary boxes. If I didn't want to have this island with me over here, I could just close it over, and then I will zoom into this part of the map. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to keep it as is for this. I'm going to click on done. And now you can see I have a new map type that is my custom DK postcode. And here you see I have my map. So I can now click done. And you will not notice that I have used two different data sets. That's why it's separated. So visually just telling you, hey, just be aware that these data sets are not connected. And now I can pull this over, and you'll be able here to then see I'm actually displaying my data in a different way, a visually different way, that makes sense to my end users. Hopefully, maybe it doesn't for you guys, but you know, anybody in Denmark would know what this actually means. One thing that is really interesting here, I find, if you look at it from a design perspective, is that when we are, you know, presented even with a bar chart, our brain instantly start looking from our left to right, and we start reading every single thing. The same thing if you're presenting an end user with a table, they'll start reading everything, and it will take a lot of time to actually get to the detail that they need to. If you introduce something like a custom map that is more visual, you know, they can start seeing, oh, okay, there's actually an even spread of visitors all over the country. And then you can maybe say, hey, I want to click on maybe this island over here, this specific postcode, click on that. And then everything else, if I was using the same data set on multiple widgets, would start actually changing, and I can start drilling down. So this is then becoming a way for easier to comprehend a lot of details, a lot of information. If you visually give them an option to see something that is easy recognizable and doesn't force them to start reading. But then, of course, in the later, maybe step 3 or 4, you want them to start being able to looking through maybe tables, or even something where you can get a little bit more reading details. This is a little side jump, but something I find really interesting and important when we're designing dashboards. Actually, I think we have, let me just check. Yeah, we have a little time, so let me just show you one thing. I have here my postcode. Just wanted to show you, this is the file that we're actually generating. One thing that you want to notice is that we actually have a name component here. The name component is what's really, really important, because remember when I did my grouping and I had the postcode, what I actually did was making sure that in my GeoJSON, which is this big file here, everything that is called map is equal to the postcode, to the grouping or to the value that I'm expecting in my data set. So there has to be a map between that. And then you can start seeing these are all the coordinates, and they're basically making up the shapes within your dashboard. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to start and typing all this out. There's a lot of free files online you can find. And if you want to do something crazy, little thing that doesn't really make sense, then let me just see if I can show you this dashboard. Boom, boom, boom. Is it this one? I think it's this one. You can also do a bacon map, something that doesn't really make sense, but basically the purpose of this is to say that you can take anything that you want, any picture, and you can convert it into a GeoJSON file without having to sit and type everything. So that video that I mentioned in the slides here, that's where you'll get kind of the steps to do that. So definitely have a look at that if you find this is interesting. Cool. So actions. So yes, as I said in the beginning in the agenda, that one of the things that is really important when we're designing all these dashboards is that we also want to make sure that they're actually being used, because else all the time and effort that we spend is basically a waste. So one of the things, there are two things that I'm going to cover today, but one of them is going to be actions, which is a brilliant way to kind of start having that user adoption. And what is action? So hopefully you're all familiar with global actions in Salesforce. And basically we can enable those on our data set. We can also use global, what's it called, bulk actions if we want. So if we want to do something on all the data we have, there's another way to do that with with bulk actions. So typical examples, as you can see here, is we can maybe open a record in Salesforce, we can post a chatter, or we can add a bunch of contacts to people or to a campaign within Salesforce. Again, there's a little YouTube video here if you want to see how it's done. A little guide if you don't remember exactly what I did, but let's try it out now with the global actions. So what I would have to do is I have to go back to Analytics Studio and I have to go to my data set, because this is something we're going to enable on the data set itself. You can see here I have my Apex hours, so I'm going to go all the way into the right, and you can see I'm actually able to edit this column or edit this data set. So I am now in here. This is where I'm able to go ahead and enable actions. Which, sorry, I'm a little confused because they've changed this. How annoying. Where is it? Huh, that's funny. Sorry, that has been changed. Oh, there it is. Ha, see, I also learn something new every day. It normally was all the way down here with a button, but with the new release, it's now in this gear icon. So this is the reason why you always want to read the release notes, which I have done, but that one I didn't pick up on. Anyway, what we want to do is when we have our, let's say, opportunity, maybe we'll do our account name here, because I don't actually have my opportunity name selected. So when I have my account name in a data set, in my grouping, I want to be able to select that, and I want to open up maybe my account ID. So here I have selected my account ID.name, and what I have to first say is what is the corresponding ID field within the data set that I want to use. And in this case, it's going to be my account ID. So the next thing is, let's say if I had selected opportunity ID here instead. Now an account can have multiple opportunities, right? So in that case, if there was multiple opportunities and I clicked on an account name, Einstein Analytics wouldn't know which one to open. Then we can have our display field to say, hey, it's coming up with a pop-up window saying which one do you want to open, and then you can select which fields from the data set do you want to present to the end user. Now in this case, I'm going to leave that blank because it's a one-to-one connection, account name to account ID. So in this case, I'm just going to click on the open Salesforce records, because I want the user to be able to do that. And I also want them to be able to perform Salesforce actions. So I'm going to click on that. You can see I have the option of saying all actions or choose a specific action. So if I only wanted them to be able to create a new event, I can select that. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and choose all actions. Now, if I click save, and I go back to my new dashboard here, let me just hit save. This is something that is always important, because you never know when you end up refreshing. And a little tip, once you've saved it the first time, you can just hit S on the keyboard and it will stay save as well. But let's just add quickly a new step from the Apex hours. And we'll do sum of amount and let's do account ID.name, and then let's say account name. We're gonna sort this as well. Hit done. Sorry, this is going a little bit fast, but this is just to illustrate the around the configure actions. And I'll add this in. I'll hit S, and let's preview this dashboard now. Now, what you can see here is I can actually start now to select different things on my dashboard, and the two things that are using the same data set is reacting to each other. Now you can see I can't select anything here, but if I go ahead, and hopefully I haven't, let's just check, I don't need any of these. Nope, it's all good. Let's hit refresh, because we just need to have those changes that they just need to save. Now, if I now select anything here, you can see that things are starting to change, but you can also see, hopefully now, that there's a little drop-down arrow. And if I click on that, I can now either post to chatter, I can go ahead and open the Salesforce record up. Basically, any of the Salesforce global actions that you have enabled on this object would be able to be used. So that's definitely one of the things that I would recommend for user adoption, because not only getting insight, but also starting to actually take action on the insight that you're getting. Something that is really important and something that is really differentiating this product. I don't have time, I think, to show the bulk actions right now. Again, that's one of the things I can pick up on if you are interested. But basically the way it works is that we have a table and we start doing our selections, and on the table itself, I can then enable bulk actions. So I can say everything that is in this table now, apply that bulk action. And basically it's whatever you want it to be. So if you can build it with Apex, then you can go ahead and do it. I have an example on my blog how you can actually take things, a segmentation you're doing in a dashboard, and then you're pushing it directly into Marketing Cloud using Apex and Visualforce. So that's all you need, Apex and Visualforce. I'm sure for some of you guys it will be easy. For me, it's really difficult because I'm not a developer. So I'm not an expert on Apex. I always need to kind of like get people to help me out with that. But the whole information should be in the documentation of how that is actually generally how that works. Cool. Moving back to the presentation. So embedding. Embedding is basically making sure that we are using the dashboard where it's relevant. So instead of having it siloed away in a system, you have to open up, you have to go into Analytics Studio, move away from Salesforce. Well, it's the same, but you know, you have to click on something that opens up a different view and it looks different, and you have to think about going there. Instead of having to force the user to think that whole process, we're actually taking the dashboard and we're embedding them exactly where the users are. So a typical example could be that you could have an account overview with different opportunity data, with maybe case information on the account page, and we can even filter on just looking at the relevant account here. So we're not taking all the cases and all the opportunities, but just what is relevant for this specific account. Again, there's a little YouTube video here if you want to try it out yourself. Let's have a look at how it's actually working. Cool. So for this, I have my dashboard. I'm actually supposed to now move away from Einstein Analytics and into standard Salesforce. So here I am on the home page. So I can actually go in and I can start editing my page. And what you'll notice is, I'm sure you've seen this picture before, down here, we actually have a Lightning component that's still a little bit legacy. It's called Wave Dashboard and not Einstein Analytics. Probably going to change at one point, but for now, it's still called this. So we can take that, we can drag it into any place on the screen, and we can actually embed that, maybe that fancy dashboard I just created, the apex hours. I can go ahead, define what is the height, what is, do I want to have show title? Do I want to show the header? Do I want to open links in new videos or windows? All these kind of options I have, and I can go ahead and start saving this. Probably actually have to activate this, to be honest. So let's say we just do that quickly. Activate, hopefully. If I now click back, you should, if my Salesforce memory, yeah, is okay, you can now see that I have my dashboard embedded into the page. Now, I did cheat a little bit. I did actually create a embedded dashboard on our account page. So let's just have a look at that one as well. So here you can actually see we have the sales overview of this specific account. So I can go in and see what is the goal for the closed one. You can see here, this is how much we've actually closed now, but it's also comparing to what we closed last year at the same time. It goes in here for each of the different dates as well and say how, you know, closed one, how is it actually looking per year, month. And you can see we have all these different win rate, average deal amount, all these different KPIs within our specific dashboard. Now, this would be not so relevant if it was showing everything, right? If it was showing every single account I had within my org. So what I actually can go ahead and do is I can filter this dashboard to just show what I want to do. Now, before I do that, let me just show you a little bit. So this is the JSON of our filter. And what it's actually doing here is in my dashboard here, let me just see if I can show both things at the same time. So what it's actually doing is this dashboard we're seeing, this is based off a data set, right? So in this case, my data set is called opportunity. And this is all I'm referring, saying, hey, data set opportunity, where you have this field in the data set account, ID, this is what it's called, so in the column of my data set, where you have this, if there's any selections, so if there's anything I could select here that was ID, then make that selection. It's also saying filter, so it's say where it matches the ID of the account that we're looking at. So this $, again, just illustrating this is this specific account that we're looking at right now. So make a selection where account ID has to match account ID. Also do a filter where the account ID matches the account ID. So this is all we're doing in terms of the JSON. Now, if I go in here and I edit this specific page, you'll see that I already have that filter syntax into my, my dashboard. So if I click on this component, this Lightning component, you'll see here there's this filter option where I have just copy paste that, that filter syntax in, and that actually makes it possible for me to not view every single account, but just the account that I'm looking at, but I'm reusing the same dashboard. Of course, we can then start making other options that we can do with the Lightning components, with adding filters and all this sort of stuff. I'm sure you are much more experts on that than I am, but hopefully you can see that this is something that is quite powerful, and actually give them insight, give users, your users insight where they are instead of them having to go and look at it. And if we had enabled any actions on this data set, those would apply here as well. So we can quickly, you know, create a chat post or create a task or whatever else we want to do on this specific, this dashboard. Cool. So let me just go back to the slides again. Yeah, so that's basically all I had planned to do. I do have two things that I said I could show if you want it, or we could go straight to the questions. So I'll let it up to you guys. But either show the year-to-date comparison, or also if you want to see, I have a video of the bulk action, how it actually works. Just like not the code, but how it actually in the UI works. So if you want to see that as well, I can show that. But else, it's up to you if you guys want to do just questions. Yeah.
So you can open the chat window, and there are a couple of guys posted some questions. So if you want, you can read and answer them. And if just in case like anybody have any other question, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question directly.
Okay, so if I'm looking at if we will get the recording after session, I think it's being put on the YouTube channel. Okay, yeah, you already, sorry, I'm just going through all the questions here. Yeah, this is all available in your free developer org. You do have to go in and get a specific developer org, not the regular Trailhead, but it is free. I am sure I can just add it to the slides as well, and if we can find a way to share the slides, then yeah, you can basically have a look at it yourself and try anything. Yes, I will get access to the slides. Thank you. Yeah, you can also in regular is this way of JSON filtering also available in regular dashboards? So I don't know if you mean standard Salesforce operational dashboards, so what you build in your report builder, but the filtering works different there. This is something, the JSON syntax is something that is specific for Einstein Analytics. It works in Lightning as well as Classic. However, there's just two things that are different. I believe in Classic, it's using double quotes, and in Lightning, it's just using single quotes for the field references. So that's just something to be aware of. Is it also possible to create dashboard and store outside Salesforce? So you do need to have a Salesforce license. You need to have a login, but you can also embed dashboards onto your community if that's something that you're looking to do. Yeah, but basically you do need to have a view license in order to be able to see any of the dashboards. So it would generally be something you're doing within the Salesforce platform. I think those were the questions. If I missed any of the questions, because I'm just going through it here, please unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, sure. I have a question, Vishal this side. I want to understand. I mean, I saw an option for an external data set where you can upload files, you can connect from Salesforce. But what are the external data set capabilities? Like, is there any kind of integration that is available, and what kind of automation we can put on it?
Yeah, so so on your data set side, if you're looking to do any external, you can do it several ways. So if you are lucky enough that there is a connector, let's say if you wanted to connect to Google BigQuery, then you can do that. There is a connector for that. There is also a lot of connector for AWS. So I would actually recommend you to look through the documentation to see if that is actually supported. But that is basically an easy way where you just go in, you say, enable the connection, put in the password, put in the keys, whatever you need to put in. So all the connectors have different things that they're asking for, but username and password is generally what they need. And then you start selecting what are the objects that you want to sync over. Once you have that synced over, you can use that data for anything. So you can start combining it with your Salesforce data in this data flow. Basically, it's just within the data manager that I'll be looking at next week. We're going to look at replication or data sync as it's called now. So that's, so there's a little bit of echo there. So that's within this area where it will be added into as a external data. Now, if you want to take where you don't have any connectors, you can use let's say MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Informatica, any of those middleware to actually put it into a data set. So it would push all of this data in. And as I'll cover next week as well, is once we have it in a data set as well, we can still take that and combine it with our regular in our data flow here. So we have different options of then pulling in existing data sets and start augmenting them together or joining them together into one data set. So there is different ways, and depending on what you're trying to do, there's different approaches to it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
No worries. Any other questions?
Another question related to SACL. How powerful is it? I mean, is it only for just, you can say, manipulating the filters that we can't do in the front end? Or is it something else also?
It's quite powerful. I don't know if any of you have looked at my blog, but I just posted this week a new thing that if possible in winter, where we've actually enabled AI. So there's the prediction capability and called time series. And basically that's where you can, that model is then looking at all the data that you have in your data set, and it starts making predictions. If you define 12 months ahead, then it can make predictions for what's going to look, how is it going to look in 12 months. And that's something you can do in SACL. So it's quite powerful what you can do. It's not just say, oh, apply another filter. But the aim would always be that we can enable as much as the functionality within the UI. The reality is right now that there are certain things like the time series. If you want to join two different data sets together in one chart, you have to do it in SACL as well. So there are different options for you to be powerful in the SACL, definitely.
Okay, thanks. Thanks again.
And if you want to have a look at that time series block that I did, it has a data set as well that you can use, and you can actually see how I used avocado prices, but basically how they're starting to develop. And yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for the great session, right? And thank you everyone for the joining this session. And don't forget to register for our next session on the analytic time. So we will cover all the remaining topic in that particular session. So can you go back to the slide where we have the link? Yep. So here's the link for the next session, and we will cover all the remaining topic here. So all the advanced topic like data flow and SAQL. So all this topic we will cover in our next session. And thank you so much, Eric, for joining us, and this session is really helpful.
Thank you guys for listening, and
Thank you.
hope to see you next time.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.